Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Ground and Pound podcast, the show where, as always, we're hitting you with them elbows of knowledge. And UFC Fight Night Oliveira taking on Bautista is here. And as always, your boys here on the Ground and Pound podcast are going to break the whole thing down, starting off in the early prelims, heading to the main event. And I got a guy sitting in a seat across the pond that I got to introduce, my co-host, Carlos. What's happening, Carlos?
Absolutely nothing, brother.
And kicking things off in the early prelim opener, we've got Nurmagomedov taking on Javid Basharat. Carlos, who you got in this one?
In this one, I ended up going with Nurmagomedov. He does have good wrestling. I think he does have the better wrestling of the two. His striking it's okay. He has very heavy leg kicks, but loves his spinning attacks. Even like most people use them out of desperation. And a lot of times, I think it's just from lack of actual punching power. He loves throwing that spinning back fist in close, which leaves him open for takedowns against Basharat. I don't believe that if Basharat gets him down, he's going to be able to control him down there. I just feel that I would like to see Nurmagomedov be a little bit more technical, face him up, and as technical as he is with the kicks, get that way with your boxing. Basharat, I think that he poses the same threats that Nurmagomedov poses. I think he's more of a submission threat on the ground. I think standing up, I think technically he's a better boxer. I don't think he carries that power with his kicks that Nurmagomedov does when he attacks the lower legs and the calves. I just feel that he should be able to best Basharat because I think in the grappling exchanges, his wrestling will allow him to either get back to his feet or get better position. Standing, I feel that Basharat, he's not a big puncher either, but he's a little bit more precise. And I think that Nurmagomedov will, although he's a mover, I think Basharat will be able to find shots just to look good in the eyes of the judges, but not necessarily being incredibly effective. So for that reason, I took Nurmagomedov. Also, excuse me, he's also fought the better competition and some of the bigger guys in the division, and he's had success. I don't think he's won in those fights, but he's won like some rounds in those fights against some very big guys in the division. And I don't believe Basharat could bully some of those guys the way that Nurmagomedov did. Although he does get fatigued grappling, he was still able to best them in certain points in the fight. So I'm going with Saeed to get it done.
Yeah, two for Saeed here. I think both of these guys obviously is a no-brainer that they're on a two-fight skid for a reason, but I think for very different reasons. I think Basharat, I think he kind of got a little bit exposed, obviously getting knocked out by Ricky Simone in his previous fight, losing a unanimous decision for our Sahabi. Ayman Sahabi. And Saeed Nurmagomedov obviously losing to two guys that I don't think there's any shame in losing to. Bryce Mitchell moving up in weight, obviously was able to wrestle fuck him, get that Arkansas wrestling going. And Vinicius Oliveira, at the end of the day, he's been on an absolute tear since joining the UFC. Heavy forward pressure, which got Nurmagomedov tired, along with the fact that he is now in the main event of this particular fight night. So, stars have aligned for him, so no shame in that loss. And I think this is a get-right spot here for Nurmagomedov. I think in this fight, realistically, he's going to best him everywhere. I think he's got the better wrestling, as Carlos mentioned. I do think with Basharat that he's a little bit of a pillow-handed fighter, and he kind of pokes and prods and relies on the judges' scorecards in order to get unanimous decision victories. When you look at Nurmagomedov as well, he does like the helicopter clan. He loves to be able to spin. He loves the back fist. He loves the spinning wheel kicks. He's a big fan of using those big movements, and at times they obviously do get him tired. They do kind of drain the gas tank along with the wrestling. And I think realistically here, you're looking at a guy that's going to be the guy landing the more bigger, impactful shots on the feet. And when it comes to the wrestling, I think he's got the upside in that, obviously from his background from Dagestan. I do believe in this fight, it's going to play out very much a case of Nurmagomedov needs to take over early. get in the face of Basharat, make it a fight, and really win the first 2 rounds. If it's kind of close and back and forth, I rely on Basharat's cardio to be able to take over in the 3rd round. I do think that he's going to have more success later on in the fight. But I just think with Nurmagomedov, the way you get him tired is you get in his face. If you look at Oliveira in that fight with him, he was constantly on the forward pressure. He was constantly chopping away at the leg kick. He had Nurmagomedov backed up the entire fight. And everybody knows it's very tiring moving backwards in fights. And I just don't think that Basharat can get that respect. I don't think that he's going to have that ability to be able to push Nurmagomedov back and get him tired, get him, in a place that he's uncomfortable. I think Nurmagomedov as well, if Basharat does shoot him for a sloppy takedown, I do think that Nurmagomedov got a fantastic guillotine that he can utilize. Either way, I like Nurmagomedov to get this one done. He is the slight underdog. We might be looking at dog of the week here as well. And next up at UFC Fight Night, Oliveira taking on Bautista. We've got Jakub, Wiklacz taking on Muin, Gafurov. Carlos, who you got in this one?
This one I'm going with Wiklacz in this one. I'm going to have to take him. This is going to be kind of a short breakdown for me. Hopefully, he doesn't try to stand too long with Gafurov. Gafurov throws for he swings for the fences every time he throws something. And against someone who's, as we saw, he's not the greatest when it comes to standing up. He does just enough to get in close, but if he tries to stand a little bit before he gets inside or too long, I think Gafurov's going to land something hard. So I think if Wiklacz can use that height reach advantage, time a couple of jabs or a couple of kicks, something to make Gafurov react, that's when he will shoot in for that takedown and try to exploit the Gafurov lack of grappling. And to me, I think he can get that done early. I think he had a very good showing against, what was his name, Patchy Mix. And I just think that to be able to go, pretty much roll for roll, movement for movement with Patchy, I just think that against Gafurov, once it's on the ground, it's going to be over. So Wiklacz to get it done.
Yeah, 2 for Jakub here. I'm not a big fan of Gafurov. He is a guy that I think has been a little bit inconsistent inside the UFC. In that previous fight that he had against Rinya Nakamura, I think he got a little bit lucky in the respect that Rinya Nakamura didn't decide to take him down and utilize his wrestling. Olympic level wrestler decides to stand and bang. Not a fan. Obviously, a scream at the TV moment for me, for sure. But Muin Gafurov, as Carlos mentioned, does swing for the bleachers, doesn't throw a ton of kicks, heavy forward pressure, but loves to throw the hands, loves to trade in the pocket. But we saw in that Said Nurmagomedov fight, if he shoots a sloppy takedown, he will get guillotined. He will be a little bit out of his depth on the ground. And to me, with Jakub here, he is a guy that he came out of the blocks pretty hot with that Patchy Mix win. I don't think a lot of people saw that happening. And he's a wizard on the ground. You saw in that fight, even against Patchy Mix, and I could see it happening here, where, if Gafurov does take it to the ground, same as Patchy Mix did, he is able to, kind of latch up a submission, whether it be a guillotine, whether it be a Kimura, and use that in order to sweep to get into a dominant position where he looks to do damage or he looks to strangle you. So I see the fight playing out very similar. And on the feet, you've got the power of Gafurov taking on pretty much the volume and the pace of Jakub here. So I think evenly matched on the feet. I do think obviously Jakub's kind of height and reach is going to play him a factor, kind of poking and prodding with that teep that he has up the middle. And I just see this fight at some point it's going to hit the mat, and I think Jakub's going to be able to strangle Gafurov. I think, Gafurov's either going to get frustrated getting poked and prodded from range, shoot him for a takedown and ultimately get submitted, or Jakub's going to be able to eventually get this fight to the ground and ultimately find a strangle here. I think it's probably going to be a submission for sure. If not, ground and pound, soften him up and go for the choke. But either way, going with the Polish man to get it done. And next up at UFC Fight Night, Oliveira taking on Bautista. We've got Priscila, Cachoeira taking on Klaudia, Sygula. Carlos, who you got in this one?
Another short breakdown for me. I'm going with Cachoeira to get it done. I'm taking it just because I think Sygula can't get her to the mat, and that's probably her only way to victory in this one. And to be honest with you, unless Sygula can get some high volume and some good movement, defensively move her head a little bit, move her legs, like some good in and out, changing angles or something on the feet, I really don't see her winning this at all. And Cachoeira, she has decent takedown defense. I think decent enough to stop Sygula. And I think that's how she's going to get it done. I think on the feet, she's probably just going to punish her and keep it off the mat.
Yeah, you're right. It was a short breakdown, but I'm going the other way. I'm going with Sygula here. Obviously, 10 years her senior in Priscila Cachoeira. I don't trust it. 37 years old at this point, even at bantamweight. Not a fan. I think Priscila Cachoeira really relies on her power, doesn't set up her shots well enough, and we know that the floor is lava when it comes to her takedown defense, because when she's taken down, she is held down for rounds at a time. With Sygula, I agree with Carlos. I don't think that the wrestling and the grappling is necessarily there, but it is in her back pocket. It's not her main skill set. I remember reading that she does have a high-level Brazilian jiu-jitsu game. Yet to see it inside the UFC, so we'll see if that's all smoke and mirrors. But I just see that 37 years old, and it bugs me. I think Priscila Cachoeira realistically relies on that power that she was able to demonstrate in that Nunes fight. And I think that saved her. That would have been a 4-fight losing streak, and she probably wouldn't have even had this fight here to be able to compete in. So I do think realistically that on the feet, Sygula is probably out of her depth. I think Priscila could definitely catch her at some point. But she showed, I think, in her previous fight against, what was her name? Arina Alaskarov. In that fight, that she's willing to trade in the pocket. She's willing to throw down. She's willing to, lay hands on her opponent. She's not necessarily going to come in there and just take the easiest path to victory, which does kind of worry me for this fight. But if you've got a woman that realistically you can take down, I think you try and get a body lock, even if it's not necessarily your main skill set. You try and take her to the mat and wear on her, take that power away. And I think from there, she's going to have all the success she needs, whether it be on the feet or on the ground. But I just think here, time is not on her side for Priscila. I think you've got the younger fighter here, the hungrier fighter here, with obviously the more, kind of skilled upside here. And I think obviously she can come in, she can work on her grappling and maybe use it for this particular fight. This might be her breakout performance when it comes to the ground game. And I think that Priscilla's relying on that one shot to really land. And I don't trust fighters when it comes to just having to land that one shot. So give me Claudio Sygula here, a little bit of dissension on the Ground and Pound podcast. And next up at UFC Fight Night, Oliveira taking on Bautista. We've got Bruna, Brazil, taking on Ketlen, Souza. Carlos, I know you got a lot to say about this one. Who you got?
I got a lot to say. I don't know if many people got a lot to say about it, but I think they're both kind of a win-loss kind of fighter. I think Souza carries a little bit more of the power in the cage. I do wish she would change levels in her striking, mix it up a little bit. She has thrown leg kicks. They've come out pretty hard. I don't know why she wouldn't throw them anymore. She's a bit more boxing heavy. Souza's going to have to close the distance, get right on Bruna Brazil's chest, and throw hooks, because that's where she's a little bit more dangerous to the body. Come up top, back and forth. And I think, like I was telling you earlier, I think Bruna's just a little stiff in her striking. I think she's a little slow in her movement. That's got to be my only reason. I don't think she's going to find a way to get Souza to the ground unless Souza actually takes her down and ends up on bottom, gets reversed in some way, gets swept. And since neither woman looks to go to the mat very often, I think that this kind of plays to Souza. So that's why I'm taking Souza to get it done.
Yeah, 2 for Souza here. I don't see how Bruna Brazil can be the favorite in this matchup. It's kind of crazy to me. Bruna Brazil, obviously, getting cut from the UFC, going to the road to the UFC, now coming back here. Ketlen Souza has also been competitive in her previous 2 fights. Pierre Rodriguez has looked like an absolute world beater since joining this division. Split decision loss to her, looked very competitive in that fight. Angela Hill as well, always competitive in every fight there. No shame in losing to Ange at this point in her career. And I think Ketlen Souza is the more athletic, faster, heavy-hitting striker here. And like Carlos mentioned, I don't think it's going to play out on the ground. Obviously, Bruna Brazil is going to have a slight height and reach advantage here, but I think that's the only advantage that she possesses. As Carlos mentioned, very stiff on the feet. I think she's very, very hittable. And I think when Souza was able to land that big right hand against, was it Yasmin Horigi in that big Mexican event? Was it in the Sphere? I think that was kind of her breakout performance, a demonstration of her power. She was able to latch up a rear naked choke in that one after she dropped her, and I think realistically, there's no way she should be the underdog here. More polished. I've not necessarily seen a ground game from her. Maybe that's going to be Bruna Brazil's path to victory here that I don't know about. Going to get her to the ground with some sort of female head and lock. What's the head and arm throw that you see a lot with the women that doesn't work with the men that DC has crazy fits about? Maybe we see that here. And ultimately, Bruna Brazil gets into a dominant position and kind of wins with the ground game. But I don't see it. I think it plays out on the feet. I think Souza's got the power. I think that she's going to be able to land to the body and come upstairs. And I think Bruna Brazil is far too slow to really hang with her on the feet. So she's going to rely on the grappling, and she might even shoot in and get submitted here by Souza, who might even have an underrated ground game that we don't know about. So Ketlen Souza all the way here for me. Might even be an underdog player of the week. And next up at UFC Fight Night, Oliveira taking on Bautista. We've got the human helicopter Alex Morono, a fan favorite here on the Ground and Pound podcast, taking on Donchenko. Carlos, who you got in this one?
I got to go with Donchenko on this one. 24 years old, very hard hitting, technical striking. Love the wrestling. Tiger Muay Thai guys display in their fights, like, their takedown defense, their ability to get back up. I enjoy that because when they get back up, they're just ready to do more damage. Throws a lot of variety at any position, stuffs takedowns very well. Donchenko, he's a dog. I got to love that guy in this fight. Anyway, I don't think Morono is going to look good after 2 minutes in this fight. I think he's going to be able to move the way he normally does. He's light on his feet. And then he's going to just start dancing around. And like you had mentioned earlier, he's going to start spinning, doing his attacks. I wish I never noticed. I wish you never pointed that out. But now I know all he does is throw those spinning attacks when it gets a little desperate. Unless he can implement some of his ground game, his jiu-jitsu, that's supposed to be a lot more high level. And it may be high level, but sometimes I feel like he doesn't have a way to get it to the ground. I just don't think there's a way that he's going to slow down Donchenko on the feet. I don't think there's a way that he's going to slow him down to get him to the ground. So Donchenko to get it done.
Yeah, before I go off on Alex Morono, Donchenko looks like the real deal. Really impressed with him. I said to Carlos off air, I love the fact that this guy utilizes the step-in elbow. Boxing combinations look crisp. Really interested to see how he develops inside the UFC. Only 24 years old, obviously winning the Ultimate Fighter as well. It's only going to do wonders for his confidence, and DC had a lot of good things to say about the guy. I think the sky's the limit for him. I do think, obviously, as he progresses through, he's going to kind of face a few stumbling hurdles, but I like this kid. I think it's definitely somebody to watch out for. Power in the hands, will mix in wrestling as well, just to kind of change the level, change the complexity of the fight. Does go to the low calf as well. But here we go, Alex Morono time, people. When it comes to an Alex Morono fight, if you have never seen this guy fight, he is a guy that is very good on the ground. Not trying to shit on the guy. He is a UFC veteran, 35 years old. He's been around the block, fought the who's who, yada, yada, yada. But when it comes to Alex Morono, if you have to listen to any performance that he has in the first 5 minutes or even the first 3 minutes, he looks good in there. He stays tight. He stays crisp. He's, pumps the jab. He throws the teep kick. And then all of a sudden, 3 minutes in, he gets tired and he'll start to just either do one of two things. He'll brawl or he'll spin like a helicopter. You'll hear Saif Saud in the corner of his start yelling, "No, Alex, no, Alex." And that's when you know that at that moment that whoever Alex Morono is fighting is going to capitalize on that, and that he's getting tired, because it will probably happen in this fight as well. Small apex cage. You'll hear Saif Saud yelling, "No, Alex, stay tight, stay crisp." He's not going to listen, and it's going to go downhill from there. I just think Alex Morono is one of these guys that he has a great ground game. I think it's second or third degree Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt that refuses to take fights to the ground. He'll go on a 3-fight skid, and then all of a sudden he'll decide he's going to wrestle and he's going to grapple, and he'll submit somebody, and that's what kind of keeps him around. I don't see that being a factor here. Donchenko is a pretty good athlete, very sort of stocky build as well. I think he's going to be able to defend any takedowns Morono does decide to shoot, and if it plays out on the feet how I think it does. Obviously, Carlos Leal was able to knock out Alex Morono in his previous fight 10 months ago. I think we could be looking at something similar here. Donchenko, I think he's definitely going to walk him down. I think he's going to be measured and look for that kill shot, and I think he's going to find it. Give me Danilo Donchenko here to get his first UFC win inside the Apex cage this Saturday. And next up at UFC Fight Night, Bautista taking on Oliveira. We've got Eduarda Moura taking on Cong Wang. Carlos, who you got in this one?
I'm going with Wang in this one. I'm not very sure how this is going to play out. Obviously we don't, but she has decent takedown defense. I think it's a little bit better than decent, and I think her athleticism is actually going to help her win this fight. I think Moura is just a little too slow. I think that striking wise, not that she's going to try to stay on the feet with Wang. I think that she's going to try to implement some takedowns. I just see Wang stuffing them, creating some distance, getting that separation, unloading a couple of shots, and then stuffing another takedown. I think Moura's lack of wrestling. When I say lack of wrestling, I mean wrestling technique. She doesn't have the best technical wrestling. So I think that's what's going to help. That's going to make her struggle in getting this to the ground. And then I just think that on the feet, maybe she's going to get a little gas. Wang is going to be able to open up a little bit more, look for the takedowns, try to stuff those, and stay on the feet. I think that Wang moves enough. She stays long enough. And she doesn't really throw in combination, so she throws a strike, gets out of the way, throws a strike, gets out of the way. I think she does that. She starts to have success. She creates a little bit of space, and that's her road to victory on this one. I don't see Moura being able to keep up with her athletically with the speed. I just think that, and even if Moura darts in and tries to sprint at her for the takedown, I could see her running into a knee or a punch or a kick or something. I can see her running into a strike. So I'm going to go with Wang for that reason.
Yeah, Moura's had success since she's moved up in weight. Obviously, there's no secret to the fact that when she started off in the UFC, she tended to struggle to make weight. She was pretty big for that division. Since moving up, she's obviously been on a 2-fight winning streak. And she has that heavy sort of wrestling base that she will just shoot and reshoot and keep having that pretty much that skill set throughout the whole entire fight. Even if she doesn't get the fight to the ground, she'll look to hold you up against the fence, stomp on your feet, Kamaru Usman style, beat you up to the thighs with the knee, anything that she can do to make the fight dirty. And that's the kind of path to victory she's going to have to show here if she wants to come out with the victory. Obviously, small cage over at the Apex, it definitely could suit her, but you have to think that that Wang Kong's kind of team and her whole game plan and her whole style since joining the UFC has kind of been preparing for people that want to take her down. High-level striker. You have to think that she's been working on the takedown defense, and I think that's what's going to get her over the top here. I think, as Carlos mentioned, she is a mover. I think she's going to dart around on the outside, kind of poke, prod, and really just look for that, kind of sniper shot here as Eduarda Moura kind of, leaves openings on the feet as she shoots him for sloppy takedowns as the fight plays out. I do think here that there is definitely a path where we haven't seen Wang Kong taken down and held down. And what does that ground game look like once you get her there? And I do think that Moura could, shoot him for a double leg and then maybe, kind of change to a single, ultimately get the fight to the ground, and maybe we could be looking at a whole round there for Moura with heavy top pressure, kind of beating up Wang Kong there. But we have to believe that Kong's takedown defense is going to hold up. It's something she's definitely been working on. She knows that people are going to look to take her down, and there's no secret who the better striker is here. So the more athletic striker is who I'm going to go with. I'm going with Wang Kong here to get this one done on the feet, unanimous decision victory. However, I do think that there's a path to victory that we've seen and an upset potential here in Eduarda Moura to shoot him for takedowns, ultimately get one and win the fight with heavy top control in the small Apex cage. But gone with Wang Kong, not super confident though. And next up at UFC Fight Night, Oliveira taking on Bautista. We've got Dustin Jacoby taking on Julius Walker. Old lion, young lion. Carlos, who you going with?
I got to go with that old lion here. I'm going with Jacoby to get it done. Walker's game, ready to mix it up on the feet. Just be able to get this fight in close pretty much, but that's going to be the wrong decision. Jacoby's not going to allow him to get that close without eating something on the way in. And Julius Walker has no head movement. He doesn't keep a high guard. He doesn't really move his feet just to go forward. He doesn't change angles. And he's going to eat some shots from Jacoby. And Jacoby's a big guy. He's a heavy striker. And he has pretty good takedown defense. You know what I mean? And I don't think Walker has very good takedown. So I think that's just a recipe for disaster, and I think that's also a recipe that'll get Jacoby the victory. So I'm going with Jacoby to get it done.
Yeah, I look at Justin Jacoby as pretty much a decent gatekeeper. A decent gatekeeper for the top 15 here. He's a guy that realistically, when you look at his skill set, he keeps fights on the feet and he has good kickboxing. He's a guy that if you can't really do anything spectacular, especially at 205, he is a guy that's going to mangle you on the feet. And if you can't take him down with high-level wrestling, he will beat you on the feet. And Julius Walker, to me, he's just a good athlete. He's not a guy that has a good skill set inside of the cage. He is a good athlete. He looks to try and, kind of get body locks, trip takedowns, and ultimately get you to the mat. He is not going to be able to do that here against Dustin Jacoby. He had a very, sort of sloppy back and forth fight against Rafael Cachoeira. I know Carlos is one of Carlos's favorite fighters. And he's a guy that I just don't really see being able to do anything here against Dustin Jacoby, even though Jacoby is 37, obviously coming towards the end of his, or the tail end of his career, in my opinion. I think he's still got plenty in the tank to be able to beat a guy like Julius Walker. Even if Walker pushes the pace, I think he's just going to get caught at some point by a much more technical striker. And I do think in this fight that Julius Walker is just going to be completely out of his depth. One of my more confident picks, which is crazy for me to say here as a 37-year-old, I'm normally bashing the old heads, but I do think that Justin Jacoby is going to be able to keep this one on the feet, land the harder shots, and maybe even find the knockout blow here. So give me Dustin Jacoby here in a knockout victory. And next up at UFC Fight Night, Bautista taking on Oliveira. We've got Rizvan, Kuniev taking on Jailton, Almeida, the big boys. Carlos, who you got in this one?
I'm going to have to go with Almeida in this one. Should be able to get Kuniev down to the ground, control him, and take over the fight from there. Kuniev, though, is able to stuff some takedowns. He is able to wrestle pretty good. The fight's going to be boring, okay? But if Kuniev can actually, keep it off the ground, I think that he's obviously going to win. He's got a little bit better stand-up. But the only thing I could see happening is, because Almeida is incredibly strong for the weight class, too. And, he's picked up big boys like this and dumped them and just stayed on top. And I just think that once he gets him down, I feel that he's going to find a way to get the submission. I think he's just a little too athletic, a little too slick. He's going to be able to control him. And I think that's how this fight plays out. I would love to see Kuniev get up and throw a couple shots and lay him out because, who doesn't like a knockout? But I just don't see that happening. I see Almeida being able to control him on the ground, probably being able to get his back and get the finish. So I'm going with him to get it done.
Did you guys hear that, ladies and gentlemen? I set this fight up perfectly. The big boys nail the names, and then Carlos comes in with this fight's going to be boring. I'm going with Almeida too. I don't necessarily see this fight playing out well for Kuniev unless he can keep it on the feet. We saw in that Curtis Blades fight, Curtis Blades was able to get 2 takedowns on him, especially late in that one. I think Almeida, like Carlos mentioned, is far too athletic here. Kuniev does definitely carry some power, some pop. He's definitely lost a little bit of weight since the picture I'm showing here on the screen since his Contender Series debut. But to me, it doesn't really matter. Almeida here is in the top 3 for a reason. He is a guy that can, get on top. He can beat you up. And realistically, the only real knock on him is that when he gets you into dominant positions, he doesn't go for the finish. He's been kind of riding out decisions recently. Obviously losing that split decision to Volkov. No shame in that. Volkov is a great fighter, very well-rounded, but most of the time he is getting you down. He is beating you up. He is, kind of taking the back, going for the submission or, beating you up from mount. I do think he's going to have difficulty getting Kuniev down. He is obviously from the part of the world in the mountains, with the whole cousins and the whole Dagestan thing. Whether he implements that and that whole strategy with the whole wrestling, maybe he goes back to it, would serve him well here to keep it on the feet. But ultimately, like Carlos said, I think Almeida too athletic, too fast, and ultimately at some point is either going to get into a dominant position and land some ground and pound, or he's going to ride out enough top pressure here and enough ground control to be able to win this one on the judges' scorecards. But feel pretty good about Almeida here. I think he gets back in the win column in a big way.
I wish Almeida would use some ground and pound.
And next up at UFC Fight Night, Bautista taking on Oliveira. We've got Farid Basharat taking on Gene Matsumoto. Great fight here, Carlos. Who you got in this one?
I'm gonna go with Gene Matsumoto to get it done. I just like him. I like the way he's striking. I like the way he stops takedowns. I think he has good wrestling. He's able to create the separation to get back to his feet. He attacks the lead leg. Love the calf kicks. Good cardio. Good striking. I think Basharat, he leaves some openings. He leaves some gaps that maybe Matsumoto's going to be able to take advantage of. And that's not to say that Basharat's not an animal. Like the guy, he can do everything too. And I think that on the feet, his striking is probably a little bit more physical. It looks like he strikes a little bit harder, a little bit sharper, and I think he's a little bit more accurate. I think that's also something that Matsumoto's going to start to develop a little bit later. Um, that's more of, I think, of an experience thing with him. I think, not that he's too young to not be experienced to do it. I just think that he's gotten away with coming forward, throwing his strikes, and just having a little bit of movement, whereas Basharat has probably picked it up late a little bit more. I think he's a little bit more athletic, and his technique just looks a little bit sharper. You know what I mean? Like, I think he's just a little bit more accurate than Matsumoto is. And yeah, it's a tough one because I think this is close. I'm just going to give the edge to Matsumoto because what I saw in the Rob Font fight is when he started mixing it up, he was getting tagged with some shots. Rob Font, he's got a good shot. He's got some good pop in that weight class, and Matsumoto kept coming forward, and he was looking for takedowns. He was looking to mix it up with them, and that was on short notice. Now, I don't know if it makes a difference because they're both young. I think Basharat's 28, he's 26, so they're all pretty much around the same area. And I think that he just wants it. I think he's hungry. I'm not saying Basharat isn't. I just think Matsumoto wants it more. He's ready to mix it up. He's ready to get hurt, to hurt people. And yeah, I'm gonna go with him. I think he's a little grittier. I think he's a little bit more of a dog, and he's gonna get in Basharat's fate. So going with him.
Yeah, I contemplated going with Matsumoto here, and I kind of see it the same way. I think if he's going to want to get the victory, he's got to make it a kind of a greasy, dirty fight where he kind of shoots in for takedowns and doesn't get it and kind of stomps on the feet and gets in the guy's face and really just kind of gives one to get one. I think if it's a pretty fight, I think that suits Farid Basharat here. That's why I'm going to pick him. I think, as Carlos mentioned, rightfully so, in that Gene Matsumoto versus Rob Font fight, when he did decide to mix it up and kind of give one to get one, he was able to get tagged by Rob Font. And I think with Basharat here that he's going to be able to capitalize, with a slight height and reach advantage, kind of picking, prodding. And I see this fight kind of playing out how the first Volkanovski versus Lopez fight played out. And that's in the sense that, again, I think it's close. I agree with Carlos. I think it is going to be close. But I think what's going to happen is Basharat's going to be dancing around on the outside, picking, prodding, scoring points with the judges, occasionally shooting in for takedowns. Maybe, Matsumoto gets up straight away. But he's going to be kind of the one that's kind of being the matador while Matsumoto's being the bull here. And I think he's going to have to cause car crashes. And I think that Basharat's going to be on his P's and Q's and doing enough to be able to get the victory. I think if it's a slugfest that Basharat decides to oblige, I think he's probably going to lose that fight. I think, as Carlos mentioned, that Matsumoto is a guy that can, bite down his mouthpiece. He is a little bit grittier. So I think that fight definitely suits him. But I think Basharat comes in here with a smart game plan. He's going to get walked down. Matsumoto is definitely a guy that's going to get in his face, but I think Basharat is going to do enough just to be able to kind of capitalize on certain holes, certain openings that Matsumoto is going to leave by being overzealous and overly aggressive. If it's a technical kickboxing match, I think Basharat wins that all day. I think if Matsumoto comes in here, kind of looks at the Miles Johns fight, kind of looks at the fight he had against Rob Font and says, hey, let's stay technical, let's not be as aggressive, I think that's going to suit Basharat. I think he needs that style that he's shown in his last two fights to come in here and be overly zealous, overly aggressive here. I think that'll probably suit him here against Basharat, but I don't see it. I think Basharat's going to dance around on the outside, pick, prod, and ultimately get the unanimous decision victory. A boring win for Basharat. I am on the side of hoping that Gene Silva does well, especially in this division. I like him as a fighter. I've picked him in the past, but I have a feeling here that Basharat's game plan here at American Top Team is going to serve him well. And next up at UFC Fight Night, Bautista taking on Oliveira. We've got Mikhail Oleksiejczuk taking on Marc-Andre Barriault, the power bar, and a short breakdown from me here. Give me Oleksiejczuk, man. I don't trust power bar at this point in his career. Obviously, 4 of his last 5 have coming in the loss column. Who was able to get that victory over Bruno Silva, but what is a credentialed win over Bruno Silva at this point in the UFC, right? I just don't see it. Obviously, he was able to go the distance with Nurmagomedov, but he took an absolute beating in that one as well. And Oleksiejczuk, 2-fight win streak here, obviously knocking out Cedric Dumas, obviously getting the knockout of Gerald Meerschaert. But you might look at that and say, well, what does that do for you in terms of those 2 victories and those 2 low-level opponents? But it's more of one of these trends that you see with Powerbar. He's a guy that he's been getting tagged, he's been getting rocked in every fight. He's taken a lot of damage, 35 years old. And Oleksiejczuk is an absolute dog. He is a guy that's going to come forward. He's going to look for the finish. Recently moved over to Fighting Nerds. I think that's worked well in his favor, especially in terms of his game plans coming in. He's a little bit more measured than he was in the past. He tended to be a little bit overly zealous, which I think if that Oleksiejczuk shows up, there's definitely a chance that Powerbar can catch him on the feet. But I think Oleksiejczuk does it in style here, gets the knockout inside the apex, and ultimately we're looking at Powerbar getting knocked out here. Give me Mikhail Oleksiejczuk by knockout this week. Carlos, who you got in this one?
I'm also going with Oleksiejczuk because, he throws very loose. He's relaxed. He's quick. That very quick snapping left hand comes right down the middle. And Barriault, he pretty much doesn't move his head. He doesn't keep a high guard. He doesn't tuck his chin. He just eats some shots, and he's not eating them because he thinks he's tough. He's eating them because he doesn't see them, and that's what's going to put him out. And I could just see that happening. Like you said, he's on that 2-fight win streak as Oleksiejczuk, and not the best competition. And I just don't see Barriault as the best competition. I think he's right in the class with Dumas, Cedric Dumas, and who was the other guy? Well, it doesn't even matter. The point is Barriault is going to walk forward. Even if he shoots for a takedown, he's probably going to try to clinch him up against the cage. And probably before he gets low enough to clinch him up, he's going to get hit with that shot, and he's going to get rocked, and then he's just going to get finished. So I could just see him getting hit with one shot and out, or I could see him getting one shot with a succession of hammer fists coming. So Oleksiejczuk to get it done.
And that brings us to the co-main event here for UFC Fight Night. Bautista taking on Oliveira. And if you're enjoying the content, hit that like and subscribe button as we break down Amir Albazi taking on Kyoji Horiguchi. Carlos, who you got in this one?
I'm going to go with Horiguchi in this one. I went against him in his last fight, in his return to the UFC. And I just went because I know he's been fighting over in Rizin, and he's getting older, and I've seen him fight, and I'm thinking maybe he was just fighting lesser competition. But, it was years ago when he fought Manel Kape, and I thought maybe he's faded a little bit in those years, but he looked pretty damn good. He's still quick, still fast, gave a lot of problems, and he was fighting Ulanbekov, and I know Ulanbekov's not the most impressive fighter, but I went with him just because I'm like, he's been in a little bit more wars than someone like Ulanbekov. But what I don't like about Horiguchi is his hands are low when he comes in and he closes the distance, and it leaves him exposed. And 35, I think he is. And I'm like, I really don't like to see you fight exposed like that when you dart in for some strikes and for takedowns. But he's been able to get away with it in his career. I mean, he's only got 5 losses, and I've seen him take a shot and be able to get I don't want to take a shot against Albazi clean when I know that on the ground, I don't even think Albazi can get him to the ground. I think that Horiguchi's wrestling is a lot more solid than Albazi's, and I think on the feet he has the speed advantage, both foot speed and hand speed, and I would hate to see him get caught by somebody like Albazi because the athleticism plays to his favor. So not to say that Albazi is a bad fighter. I think he's very good. I think he poses a very good submission threat. I think it's going to be very hard to find it on Horiguchi. And I do think that striking-wise, Albazi is definitely a little bit more technical. Like, he throws the straighter shots. at least mixes it a little bit, throws those leg kicks in the clinch. He will throw knees and elbows, but Horiguchi likes to keep distance. So that's the thing is he going to be able to close the distance on Horiguchi and clinch him and get him to the ground and beat him up on the feet a little bit in the clinch before he gets him down? And I just don't see that happening. So I'm going to take Horiguchi to get it done.
Yeah, two for Horiguchi here. I've never been the biggest Albazi fan. I do think, obviously, the ground game is definitely good, but he's got to get it there. And I think that's definitely going to be the key in this fight. If Albazi can't get this fight to the ground, Horiguchi's going to have as much success as he wants. Obviously, as Carlos mentioned, with that Tagir Ulanbekov fight, I don't necessarily think Ulanbekov is a bad fighter, but I definitely don't think out of the Dagestan fighters that he's one of the better ones. I think he's probably one of the worst ones, in fact. Cardio falls off a cliff, can't always get good top pressure and keep fighters down with his wrestling. And I think with Horiguchi that he's well-rounded. He's a guy that a lot of people didn't know coming into that fight, and that's why he was the underdog in that fight and was able to pull off the upset with the third round rear naked choke. And I think realistically, this fight just comes down to can Albazi get it to the mat. If I don't think he can. I think Horiguchi, as Carlos mentioned, has got enough of a ground game here to keep this one standing. I think on the feet, he's going to be absolutely lightning in comparison to Albazi, who is very, very stiff on the feet. I think his striking got exposed a little bit in that Brandon Moreno fight. Brandon Moreno pretty much just beat him pillar to post in the boxing, jabbed his face off, and it was clear who won that one. And I think with Horiguchi that the speed here is going to be the deciding factor. He's going to dart in and out, landing big shots. If he wants to be able to get into dominant positions on the ground after he knocks him down, I could see that as well. I think Horiguchi's ground game is underrated. I think he's an unknown entity inside the UFC. I think that's why they're kind of pushing him here in the co-main event, giving him a name, giving him somebody high up in the rankings here. Obviously, he was able to beat Tagir with no problem. He looked pretty good doing it. I think he does the same here with Albazi. I don't necessarily think that Albazi's going to get finished, but I do think if you go back and look at his previous performances, Kai Kara France split decision, a lot of people screamed robbery in that one. And then you take the Costa fight where he was able to get the ground finish, but that was 3 years ago. He's coming off of injuries since then. He's not looked good since then fighting the upper echelon guys in the division. And I think Horiguchi's got all the experience and all the upside here, all the momentum since his last victory inside the UFC against Tagir. Give me Horiguchi here to get this one done. I feel fairly confident in him this week. And that brings us to the main event here for UFC Fight Night. Bautista taking on Oliveira, and that's exactly who we're going to break down. Mario Bautista taking on Vinicius Oliveira in the main event. Carlos, who you got in this one?
I'm going with Bautista in this one. Bautista, he can diffuse the power of Oliveira, not get hit with shots clean, not get hit with the whole power of everything. And he has good movement. He's very technical in his striking, defensively, offensively as well. He's got very good wrestling. He's just well-rounded, I guess, the best way to say it. And Oliveira, he's a bully. He relies on his toughness. He disrespects his opponent's power, which, as of now, it's done well for him, and it would do well for him in this fight. I don't think Bautista's got like the big pop to get him out of there, but he loves to be physical. He loves to bully, and his cardio doesn't seem to be at that level. As he's beating people up in those fights, he's not winning every round, but you can see the rounds where he starts to get better because his physicality just happens to be a little bit more menacing and effective than his opponents, and then he starts to take over from there. But if you look at him and you watch him, he's actually physically just drained. And I don't think Bautista's going to be that way. I think he's coming in. I think he's just too technical to use up all the strength he has to hold off Oliveira. I think there's angle changes he can use. I think there's grappling he can use that can keep Oliveira in one place. I think there's angles he can change to keep the power off the shots. And I just don't see it. Now, do I see a finish? I could see a possible submission finish. Do I see a knockout? No, because Oliveira's a tough guy, but I could see Bautista getting this fight done, whether it's decision or a submission. I just see it happening. I don't see any way that Oliveira can get this done. I just think Bautista too technical.
Yeah, anybody knows here on the Ground and Pound podcast, I've been the biggest Mario Bautista hater since that Jose Aldo fight, and I think rightfully so. But I'm ready to make amends. I'm ready to put biases aside. 2026 is about new beginnings. It's about, turning over a new leaf and being a better person. Fuck Mario Bautista. No, I'm just kidding. I'm going with him here. I think Carlos hit the nail on the head. He's far too technical here for Oliveira. You look at the level of competition. Mario Bautista's been fighting the best of the best so far in this division, and if you look at Oliveira, this is going to be a big step up in competition in the rankings for him. He has looked good. I am impressed with Oliveira. Power in the hands. Obviously, he will mix in takedowns. Has a good Muay Thai base. He will walk you down with heavy forward pressure the whole time. Big for the weight class. Chops at the low kick, but I think realistically, Mario Bautista could double him up in volume. I think he's the more technical striker in terms of the boxing. I think he's willing to give one to get one. I think that he's probably the better grappler as well. And I think the longer this fight plays out, I think it's going to serve Bautista. You saw in the Saeed Nurmagomedov fight with Oliveira that he gets tired himself in 3-round fights. And this is a 5-round fight here in the Apex that Bautista can definitely capitalize on. I think if he mixes in grappling early, he could get Oliveira tired. I think if he puts up volume and kind of pokes and prods at him, he could definitely get him tired here. And I think realistically, Bautista is the right side to be here, as much as it pains me to say it. I was thinking about picking Oliveira, but I think when you compare skill to skill, I think Mario Bautista should come out with the victory here. Unless Oliveira catches him on the feet and then lands, kind of it's punchy kicky at the end of the day. Both guys, could obviously land on either one and get the victory. But I do think that Mario Bautista is the better, more well-rounded fighter in this matchup. And if you look overall, Oliveira is a guy that hasn't fought the higher level of competition at this point. Kyler Phillips, not necessarily a guy that I rate. He is a guy that's kind of, twinkle toes on the outside and only really has one game plan and no cardio himself. Saeed Nurmagomedov, the same, a lot of spinning attacks. He is a guy that doesn't have cardio, but what's going to happen when he faces a guy that can put up volume is the more skilled striker and has better cardio overall. So give me Mario Bautista, all biases aside. And that's all we've got time for here on the Ground and Pound podcast. If you enjoyed the content, hit that like and subscribe button. Let us know who you're going with in the main event. And before we wrap things up, Carlos, what do you want to say to the people?
Oh, I hope you guys enjoyed the breakdown. We enjoyed doing it. And if you did like it, don't forget to like and subscribe. And we'll see you on the next one.
We'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.
Peace.